Listen closely. Do you hear that? No? Good. Because after these 3 stories, you will.
This is the first time I have actually ever told any living soul. I tried talking about it to my then GF, now wife, but I realized how crazy I sounded and stopped. In reading several of these, I am somewhat comforted by knowing other people are similar to me in that they too see things or have an overactive imagination, as one Redditor stated it. For years now, I have seen things at different times, things that I know aren't there. It's almost always normal human shapes obscured by the shadows, or sometimes distinct people. They never talk or anything to me. They are simply there, rarely moving. It started happening when I was very young. I would play basketball in our basement. I was very little, and there were 2 rooms off in the corners of the big room. Through those doorways, I would frequently see shadowy figures darting back and forth. A couple times I saw a brief glimpse of a face glancing at me. The skin was a pale grayish tan. He was bald, save for the typical horseshoe. This hair was pure white and very straggly and long. Horrible teeth as well. Fucker needed a dentist in a bad way. It got so bad, I eventually got too scared to be down there by myself. We moved away from that house when I was 12, and my new house's basement was less scary, with no shadowy figures, for a time. As I entered my teens, I would occasionally see strange things, mostly in mirrors or the reflections in windows or out of the corner of my eye. But since I was a little older, I reasoned it to my eyes just playing tricks on me, and I learned to ignore it, as the images weren't too frightening in nature, repetitive, or that memorable. They were just there from time to time. It was always quick images at this point, flashes of something lasting seconds or less. It did get worse. This worst and most vivid time I experienced this, I was going down my rear stairwell into my basement. Directly to the left of the bottom of the stairs was our laundry room, in which the light was always kept off. So this stairway and the door was always dimly lit. As I descended the stairs and headed right, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a hooded figure dressed in all black, standing in the doorway of the laundry room. His hands were balled up into fists at his side, and his head was looking down, so that the hood obscured his face in shadow. As I walked down the hallway away from the laundry room, I looked back once more, just as the doorway was leaving my sight, and I saw the head look up towards me. All I could see were pale blue eyes. Not unnaturally pale blue eyes, just a normal pale blue, which probably made it scarier for me. I try to be reasonable. I don't believe in monsters and the like. If something seems supernatural or unlikely, I dismiss it. My basement was pitch black, so I walked a little faster and pulled on the chain to turn on the light. Once I had illuminated the room, I realized I was pretty scared, breathing heavy and obviously rustled, but there was nothing else in there with me. Once I regained my senses, convinced myself I was just tired, I ran towards the laundry room and flicked on the lights. There was nothing there. I blamed it on my eyes playing tricks on me.
Over the course of the next few months, this happened at least 3 more times. Same exact scenario. So much so that I finally got fed up with it. I would have a feeling of dread spread over me every time it happened. Hairs standing on end. Nothing felt warm. I just was cold and scared. I felt so ridiculous. I was in my mid-teens at this point and basically felt that I was being a huge baby. Luckily, it stopped. I still occasionally have weird things that I see. I know they aren't there, and I have learned to just ignore them. I mentioned my GF/wife. There was an incident where I think she might have noticed. I hadn't seen anything in a long time. Her family and me and my friends were vacationing in the OBX, and we went for a walk down to the fishing pier. We walked to the end of the pier and just talked there for a while. During this time, a small blonde girl walked up on my left side, opposite my GF, and just stood there silently staring at me. I didn't say anything, but I couldn't stop looking over at her. I obviously was doing a pretty shitty job of listening to my GF, and she asked what I kept looking at, confirming to me that the girl was not actually present. Haven't seen that girl since. I remember this so distinctly because it is the only time I ever saw anything in the middle of the day, as clear as I see anything else. Every other time, it was always in the darkness, shadows, mirrors, or window reflections, hence why I knew it was just my imagination being an asshole. The girl did look like someone I had met before, though. Strange. Oh, damn. I just remember possibly a scarier and more frequent one I had at night. My bed was butted up against a wall, and I would sleep almost wedged right up against it. On the exposed side, I would often see a pure white werewolf slowly rising on the side of my bed. First, only the ears were visible, but almost painfully slowly, the thing would rise until the neck and above would be staring right at me, silently snarling. It was so quiet. It would rise slowly, but before anything was visible, I felt like I could sense that it was over there. So I'd roll over just in time to see its painstakingly slow and terrible rising. That fucking scared the shit out of me for a long time. I would roll over and hide in my impenetrable blanket, safe from everything. Then I finally tried to attack it, and I confirmed what I knew. It wasn't really there. I think this was when I was around 13. Currently, nothing really happens. I sleep incredibly poorly, always have. Maybe that's why I see things. And occasionally when I awake in the middle of the night, I'll see something, but I don't acknowledge it. I just give everything a mental fuck off. It's almost like a very infrequent and subtle background or cameo to my own life. I don't ever plan on letting any of my friends or family know, because it really doesn't matter and just makes me sound like a fucking loon. If I ever am robbed or broken into, and I awoke to investigate, if the thief stood still, I'd probably dismiss him entirely. Free pro tip for robbing me right there.
Maybe this isn't what you'd call creepy, but it's definitely one of the scariest moments in my lifetime. In 2004, I went canyoneering in Utah with a group from my climbing gym. In our group, there was Rick, not real name, who was the most experienced among all of us and our appointed leader for the expedition. Rick also has all the gear, and he claims he has studied the route well. En route to the cave, while we stopped by and hung out at a climber's cafe, we met an older gentleman, let's call him Joe, who was by himself and who also happened to be going to the same exact cave that we are going to. So naturally, we teamed up. Joe also had a fair amount of gears on him, which we thought couldn't hurt our chances. Besides, he's kind of old, about middle-aged-ish. We actually couldn't believe he was going alone. I think the general rule is you need at least 2 people going down a hole. Anyway, long story short, the day of the climb, this was after we hiked to the cave for 2 days. We parked our cars and we had to approach the trail on foot. Joe already said that he's got a bad feeling about the climb. We promptly shut him up and told him not to jinx anything because that would be bad luck. Joe just shrugged and continued suiting up. In caving, it is common for people to wear wetsuit because the water inside the cave never sees sun, hence very cold. I remember it was a very sunny day. There was no indication of rain whatsoever. It was sky-high blue and it was warm. This was late July. So we began our descent. I was still a rookie then, barely knowing anything about reading maps or route or setting up anchors beyond some simple knots and hitches. I remember there were 8 of us, 5 guys, 3 chicks. One of the chicks was problematic. From the 2 days of hiking, I can tell that she was spoiled and difficult person. But what can I do? She was the girlfriend of one of Rick's best friends. We hiked, descended further and further down into the hole. I still have no idea how far the hole really was, but we hiked for maybe 2-3 hours, and then we heard it. A faint, quiet rumbling, almost like the hum of a big generator. The sound reverberated throughout the chamber, first curiously low, like a very low, deep bass, and then becoming louder and louder, accompanied with a sudden rush of cold wind. That's when we heard Joe lost his shit. "Run!" he was screaming on top of his lung. "Run, run, run! Now, now, now!" I saw Joe's headlamp shaking in the distance. He was running hard. I've never seen a middle-aged man haul ass like Joe did that day. He was the leader, frontmost, and I was about 3rd from the last guy. We were in a narrow passage, tall enough for us to uncomfortably stand and creep around, while the ceiling hits our head at about a foot. If the chamber is flooded with water, we'd all be dead in no time, and that was exactly what was happening. It was a flash flood. Freak July rain had fallen on the surface, and the rainwater is now rushing to the depths of the caves. You would not believe how fast the water rose. It's not even funny. As we run and heave frantically with our wetsuits and backpacks and gears, I could see how the water was feet deep at first. I ran for another 30 seconds, and the water was ankle deep already. Another 30, and it was shin deep. I really lost my shit at that time. I genuinely thought I was going to die in that cave that day, drowned in that narrow chamber, along with 7 other strangers that doesn't even qualify as my friends yet. They're just people I met at the climbing gym, and Joe, who we picked up by the roadside.
It was getting harder to move around. By that time, the water has reached waist level. We could only waddle now. I couldn't even describe the atmosphere at that time. It was pure terror, a lot of screaming, total panic and desperation. The girls, of course, completely lost their shit, and this only made matters worse. Scumbag Tracy, the spoiled bitch, started breaking down and froze in her tracks. I mean, she froze right there, in that flooding chamber, blocking 5 people behind her. She also hadn't put on her wetsuit yet, despite repeated suggestions before we entered the cave to put on the fucking wetsuit, because it will be harder to put on the wetsuit once you're inside. I remember the water hitting us was cold, like icy death cold, and it made our movements even more difficult. Finally, Dave, Scumbag Tracy's BF, managed to pull her with all his might, and we started moving again. By that time, the water has reached our chest. I kept praying, please stop the water, please stop the water. But of course, the water kept coming. It was an insanely desperate situation. More water kept coming, and it felt like a big fire hydrant had let loose, and with its tremendous force pushing us all to a certain doom. I fought and struggled to keep moving, and all of a sudden I felt that it was getting easier and easier for me to move. Suddenly, I popped out at a larger chamber with a large body of standing water. I scrambled to get away from the entrance, where lots and lots of water are still coming through, as far as I could. I entered the standing water of the chamber. It was even colder than the flood water. This is water that has never seen the sun, and it could be as cold as a frozen lake water for all I know. It was so cold that I actually immediately contracted cramp on my right leg that was so painful. And I was already wearing a winter wetsuit. Everyone was still screaming and panicking, and we all limply swam to other side of the chamber so we don't drown in this new chamber, because it wasn't that big, and we could see that water was coming in faster than we could swim. But there's a problem. By that time, we had reached the lowest point of the cave, and one does not simply clamber up the hole you were in to higher ground without first setting up some kind of anchor system to help you get there. Besides, there were multiple paths or doors. Carelessly going down the wrong path can really kill you in terms of oxygen and further risk of flooding or getting stuck or running out of supplies. You really need to know your route. Anyway, so now Joe started to yell, "Get inside the crevice! Get inside the crevice!" In this new chamber, there turned out to be small crevices in which we could take cover, and because of its high position above the ground, this makes perfect sense. So each of us found our hole and clambered into it, and we watched the water rise and rise and rise. It never seemed to stop. The girls started crying. The guys were dead silent. Each of us were grinding our gears like, how could this happen? Am I going to die in this fucking cave? I don't even know how many meters underground I was. How long until they search for us? I'm sure not soon enough. We're all going to be dead by then. Shit, man. I wonder if death by drowning is going to be painful. How long does it take until I lose consciousness? What will the world think? 8 people dead while caving. Are we going to be on the news too? My gears kept grinding, kept going. I had 1,000 thoughts. See, they say that life flashes before you in your moment of dying. To me, what I remember most were the questions. That's all I remember were the questions. Non-stop, pounding, incessant, driving me to the brink of madness. But then, just as sudden, the water stopped. First, it was getting calmer, then trickles, then stop. Complete silence, except for the sobs coming from the girls. By then, the chamber was about, how do I say this, 2/3 full? Anyway, it was at a level where it definitely went above our heads, but not high enough to allow us to reach the ledge where the doors are. We still had to build the anchor. So we clambered down and swam towards the exit. Mother, the water was so cold. I'm going to cut most of the details here because it's long and boring, but suffice it to say this. It turns out that Joe, the old guy we picked up by the roadside by chance, was the only guy who had the gear that got us out of that hole for a good day or two, or however long for rescue to start searching for us. By which time, there'd very likely be a casualty already. Scumbag Tracy, Dave's GF, could have died from hypothermia. She had brought a summer wetsuit, where the rating for the cave was for winter wetsuit, and it was one size bigger, so it was rattling off her body. She basically weren't wearing anything. Don't even ask our journey to get to the surface after that, with her in tow. Oh, and another 2 days of approach, walk back to car.
This happened when I was about 14 years old. I lived in a small apartment with my younger sister, 9, and my parents in NY. My sister and I shared a room. The layout of the apartment was in such a way that my bedroom served as a walkthrough to my parents' bedroom. At one end was a door that connected to the living room. At the other was the door to my parents' room. We had bunk beds, which were located in the center of the room but against the wall. There were 2 windows on the opposite wall. I slept on the top bunk and my sister on the bottom. One night, I woke up from a very heavy sleep. I had no idea what had woken me up. I knew that something must have, because I felt very sleepy. I looked over at the time on the TV, and it said 3:33 a.m. I was half lying when I looked towards the window next to the living room door. The curtain was moving as if a breeze was blowing. It was the middle of a New York winter, and we always kept the windows closed. Also, we had 2 sets of curtains on the windows. One set was heavy and dark blue to block out street light, and the other sheer white. I was not scared at this point, but was wondering how the wind was getting in through the window. Then, the curtains began to sway harder, as if a stronger wind was moving them. I started freaking out. Then, the curtains lifted up all the way to the ceiling. They laid flat against the ceiling of my room, as if they had been glued there. I felt something was seriously wrong. I wanted to scream for my parents, who were no more than 15 feet away, but the sound would not leave my throat. I opened and closed my mouth, but nothing happened. I knew I needed to get help, but I was not going to climb down and pass by that window. As I tried to formulate a plan, I heard a blood-curdling scream from my mom. I ran into her room, where I found her shaking and crying. My dad was trying to console her as she was muttering something about a figure at the end of her bed. She didn't know what I had seen in my room, so this validated the experience for me 100%. When I started telling them what happened with the curtain, my dad refused to believe me. He told me that there was something wrong with my window, that it must be broken, and that's how the wind got in. Don't you just love parents? I knew what I saw because I had been awake before it started. Eventually, I returned to my bed and passed out. The next morning, we got a phone call that my uncle had passed. He and my mom were close friends and big chickens, a la Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. They bonded over their perpetual and sometimes irrational fear of the paranormal and the dead. He was a big jokester, so that was probably his last prank, because he knew that my mom was going to spaz out. Possibly unrelated to this event, there was something way off about that apartment. While we lived there, strange things happened, but we never put it together as being something paranormal. For one, it was really cold in there all the time. The bedrooms were always freezing. My parents chalked that up to bad insulation because it was an older building. My father worked nights, and I slept with my mom in her room, Big Chicken. I remember about 6 to 10 times that we would hear music playing loudly because the stereo in the living room had turned on. It was the kind that takes multiple CDs, and we could sometimes hear and see it cycling through the various CDs before it started playing. We told my dad about it, and he said that it was probably something off with the wiring. Anyways, last week,
I was talking to my little sis about the stuff that happened in that apartment and how creepy it was, and she looked me in the eye and said, "That's why I never looked." I asked her what she meant, and she said that there was always someone walking around our room. I quickly told her that she might have been hearing people going up and down the stairs of the building. She said that she often used that excuse and that of the upstairs neighbors walking to go to sleep, but that sometimes it got so intense and loud that she knew there was an actual person or thing walking by in front of her bed from one end of the room to the other. She always kept her eyes closed and the blanket over her head because she didn't want to see what it was.